If I'm honest, and maybe I should be if I'm in a pulpit, I've never liked healing stories. Academically, it makes my head hurt trying to jump through all the hoops. I mean, what does it say that God decided to visit humanity, show off just enough to become a legend, and leave the rest of us worrying either that our faith isn't strong enough to be healed, or, dare I mention, the academic headaches again? This week, I want to put down the hoops. I want us to pause. Let's not rush through these stories and celebrate the obvious ta-da miracle waiting around the bend. Instead, I want us to think about the consequences of these faith stories. Our community holds tension in so many places, and I want us to invite us to hold another. But first, I want to tell a story. My tense relationship with healing faith stories begins with my own family's medical journey. My dad is the strongest contender for the world's most twoist Enneagram 2 there is. I am secretly hoping our director of hospitality hears that and confronts me for her title. Lily, if you're hearing this, love you. Anyway, my dad was raised in a big family on a struggling farm in the middle of yet another small rural town in Oklahoma. His early years are his to tell, but in true dad fashion, I was brought up on the stories of him walking to school uphill both ways with at least a foot of snow. My dad started working back-breaking labor at a really young age. From the smattering of jobs he told me about, he worked as an oil truck driver, exterminator, managed a Sonic drive-in branch, and an entire grocery store before he broke his back. In 1993, my parents had my 5-year-old brother, a 1-year-old me, and my dad's first back surgery. At the age of 31, my dad began his surgical journey. By the time I was 10, my 40-year-old dad had undergone 3 or 4 botched surgeries that left him disabled and forced into early retirement. For a 2, the loss of the ability to serve those they love is a critical blow to their identity. I watched my dad struggle with that and ultimately learn how to reclaim his way of showing love, though it was never the way that he wanted it to be. To add more tension on a young family, the church I attended was Southern Baptist enough that I was taught about the importance and power of prayer, that prayer could heal someone physically and spiritually. They definitely towed the line on claiming some obstacles are God's way of refining humans. Even worse, maybe God is doing this so that you young tween rebel without a cause, can save your parents and God will heal your family. Just have faith. Just have faith. I hope hearing that theology curdles your stomach a bit. I hope hearing that a kid whose family was going through physical, medical, and financial trauma was being told that her dad's disability was a trial crafted by God. I hope that turns our stomach in a way that's like a sour post-bathroom after a bad burrito. That kind of queasy. Thus, my tension with healing stories. Because what about the stories that don't end with healings? What about the faith of people who live faithful, Christ-like lives and who also happen to be disabled? What about people like Heather and Haley, who shared their story in Professor Jean Barton's book, Becoming a Baptized Body? For your information, Professor Barton is an associate professor of, very interesting, occupational therapy and theological ethics at Duke University. She has a dual appointment in the Divinity School and in the School of Medicine, which is just fascinating. In addition to practicing as an occupational therapist, she writes, researches, and teaches at the intersections of disability with religious identity and practices education and theology. In an article about her newest book, Professor Barton writes about her experience with Heather and Haley. Becoming the baptized body, she says, owes its origin to a rather unexpected place, the waiting room of a multidisciplinary pediatric clinic. In this waiting room where I've met countless families, she writes, I encountered a preteen named Haley and her mother Heather, whose names have been changed and their story is being shared with permission. As Sarah was engaging with this conversation with Heather and Haley, she mentioned that she works and teaches at Duke Divinity. When this revelation of this bivocational work hit Heather, something shifted in her. Her eyes lit up intensely, and she began to lament her and her daughter's experiences in the church. Haley, she says, loves loud gospel music and being around people. She also uses a wheelchair and has an intellectual disability. Though Haley is non-speaking, she communicates her needs and emotions in a rich, diverse way. Heather longed for Haley to be baptized. In the waiting room, as they continue to share stories, Heather recounted of their family's story of traveling from one church to the next, desperately seeking a community of belonging. But Haley and Heather couldn't find this kind of church. Pastors and lay members of congregations told Heather that her daughter's vocalizations were too disruptive during their services. In many churches, Heather's wheelchair wouldn't even fit through to get to the Sunday school rooms or even to the sanctuary. And in one conversation Heather had with a pastor, she was told that it wouldn't matter if her daughter was baptized because Haley couldn't understand what was happening. Professor Barton goes on to say in an interview with Faith and Fellowship that these two stories of seeking a community of baptismal belonging is one of the many stories, wounds, and questions that disabled Christians have recounted to Professor Barton throughout the years. This is the tension that I'm asking us to hold today as we listen and remember our ancient stories. In every aspect of our faith, we must be mindful of how our practices include or exclude others. We must think through the stories we pass down. We must ask whose perspective and whose voice is missing. For folks like Heather and Haley, I wonder if their faith is like the other 9 lepers who allegedly went all the way to the priests, because that's exactly what the miraculous rabbi told them to do. And most importantly, it was in accordance with their faith to present themselves to the priests once they've been healed. It is written an entire chapter in Leviticus, chapter 13, if you're really interested, on all of the comings and goings, all of the ways in which treatment should be done for those who have any form of sign of skin infections. So this was well within their practice to present themselves, yet Jesus seems to be frustrated that gratitude was not given. The thing is, I want to know the rest of the lepers' stories, or as I was educated earlier today by Julie, people who struggle with leprosy. Thank you for educating me, seriously, yeah. Did they reach the temple with the same joy of Haley, only to be met with the same exclusion? I wonder if the priest's rituals were as closed off to them as the church who denied a beautiful child of God a sacred baptismal rite. I wonder if the one who turned back to Jesus did so because he knew the temple would never accept his healing. Worse, I wonder if he was tired of asking for help and inclusion from people who only saw him as a problem and not someone who is in need of love in a community. Disability theology is an underappreciated field of study. One of the earliest authors that I know of, Dr. Nancy Eisland, wrote the book The Disabled God: Toward a Liberatory Theology of Disability in 1994. It is still one of the leading voices for disability theology, despite the fact that its author has passed away in 2009. Within her work, Dr. Eisland detailed a wonderful encounter that she had with a woman named Nancy, who was diagnosed with MS, but whose writings detailed her own journey of faith and healing in very provocative and beautiful ways. She wrote, "These horrible things need not diminish us. They can make us more fully aware of the full range of things human, performing an authentic alchemy using disability and honesty. We merge and fashion a difficult life, but it is in life in contrast to the search for painlessness. It's real, it's authentic, it's raw. Nancy's life need not be denied nor decried. It only need to be lived. She went on to say, a difficult life is more complicated than an easy one. It offers opportunities for developing a greater range of response to experience, a true generosity of spirit. It also opens a space for honesty about death as part of ordinary life, she continues. In a really beautiful conversation that she wrote as a little bit of a poetic prose, she goes on to describe a conversation she had with a dear friend. A friend who also has MS startled me once by asking, "Do you ever say to yourself, 'Why me, Lord?'" "No, Michael, I don't," she said. "Because whenever I try, the only response I can think of is, 'Why not?' If I can make a cosmic deal, exchange for sound limbs and a thrilling rush of energy, who would I put in my place?" The reality is no one. Nothing. I might as well do the job myself now that I'm getting the hang of it, she says. As awesome as the stories of mighty Naaman and the one man who came back to Jesus are, I hope we also pave the way for stories like Heather's unending love for her daughter, and stories of Haley's face lighting up as gospel music rises around her. And I want to hear about Nancy and read her poetry of deep anguish that is raw and real, a prayer like nothing we've ever heard before. And I want to recall how my dad's face lights up when we're in the middle of the quiet woods, because for him, that's his cathedral. I want to hear these stories and so many more. And I want our children to grow up celebrating a diverse image of God that doesn't leave them fearing the worst case scenario, because they know their family of faith has got them, will carry them, will support them. So yay for healings of violent warriors and weird stories about Jesus with lepers or people who struggle with leprosy. They have their place in our history, and they're important. But UBC, I hope for us that we get excited about the task ahead of us of listening and celebrating new stories of faith. I hope we continue to take full advantage of our platform to listen and learn from all the embodiments of God's beautiful people and world. Because the reality is, we are a part of an unending, unfolding story. And God is right here with us. We've only got eyes to see, and if only we have ears to hear. Amen.